Hi everyone, I'm Elena. Before I dive into this piece of my life, a story I've never shared in its entirety with anyone, please take a second to hit that like button if you appreciate these kinds of raw, honest reflections. Your support helps this community grow and allows us to keep sharing these lived experiences. This is a story about the night I almost lost myself, and about a man who, despite everything, managed to wake me up from a very long sleep. The air on the terrace was heavy with the scent of jasmine, and that unmistakable electric charge you only feel right before a thunderstorm breaks. It was the kind of humidity that makes your skin hypersensitive to every shift in the breeze. I could feel the heat radiating from Julian's shoulder, though we weren't quite touching. We were standing just close enough that if I took a single, shallow breath, the silk of my dress would brush against the charcoal wool of his blazer. My heart was thumping in a frantic, syncopated rhythm against my ribs, a private drumbeat loud enough that I was sure it would drown out the low hum of the jazz and clinking glasses coming from the party behind the glass doors. I didn't look at him, I couldn't. Instead, I watched the way the city lights blurred into amber smudges through the rising mist. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was pressurized by 6 months of things we hadn't said. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low vibration that I felt in the pit of my stomach more than I actually heard. He didn't say anything profound, just my name. But the way he let the syllables linger made me feel like I was being seen for the first time in a decade. At 32, I had built a life that was supposed to be the happily ever after. Yet here I was, trembling because a man I had no right to love was standing 3 inches too close in the dark. For as long as I can remember, I've been the one everyone could count on. I was the reliable daughter, the dedicated architect, and the wife who never missed a birthday or a bill payment. My husband, David, is a good man, the kind of man who brings you coffee in bed without being asked and knows exactly how you like your steak. Our life was a series of perfectly executed milestones: the promotion, the mid-century modern house with the wraparound porch, the long discussions about when we'd finally start a family. But somewhere between the mortgage payments and the weekend trips to the home improvement store, I started feeling like a ghost in my own skin. I was moving through the motions of a woman who had everything, yet I felt this vacuum-sealed boredom that I was too ashamed to admit to anyone. I thought I was just tired or perhaps ungrateful. I didn't realize I was starving for a spark until Julian joined our firm as a senior consultant. It started with the smallest things, those micro moments you don't think twice about until they've already rewritten your DNA. A shared look across a conference table when a client made a ridiculous demand. A lingering hand when he passed me a set of blueprints. Julian didn't have David's steady, quiet gravity. He had an energy that felt like a low-voltage current. He was observant in a way that felt almost intrusive. While David loved the person I had become, Julian seemed fascinated by the person I used to be, the girl who went to art school and wanted to build structures that defied logic. He started bringing me books on obscure Japanese architecture and asking me questions that required more than a polite, surface-level answer. For the first time in years, I wasn't being asked about the budget or the kitchen renovation. I was being asked what I dreamt about when I closed my eyes. The emotional tension built like a slow-moving storm front. I found myself dressing for him, choosing the emerald earrings because he'd once mentioned they brought out the flecks of gold in my eyes, or wearing my hair down because I knew he watched the way I tucked it behind my ear when I was stressed. It felt like a betrayal, yet it was so subtle I could almost convince myself it was harmless. I told myself we were just work friends with high-level professional chemistry. But you don't lie awake at 2 a.m. thinking about a work friend's laugh. You don't feel a jolt of adrenaline when you see their name pop up on your phone. The guilt was a constant, dull throb in the back of my mind, a reminder that I was playing with fire in a house made of dry wood. David would ask me how my day was, and I'd give him a sanitized version, omitting the 20-minute coffee break where Julian and I had talked about our deepest fears. Every time I kissed David, I felt like a counterfeit version of myself. The night of the gallery opening was when the atmospheric pressure finally broke. The firm was celebrating a major project win, and the champagne was flowing a little too freely. The room was crowded, loud, and stiflingly hot. I saw Julian across the room, and the moment our eyes met, the rest of the noise simply faded into the background. It was a gravitational pull I couldn't fight. When he gestured toward the terrace, I followed him without a second thought, my heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. And that's how we ended up there, in the damp heat of the night, caught in a bubble of our own making. "Elena," he said again, and this time I forced myself to look at him. His eyes were dark, searching, and filled with a raw kind of honesty that terrified me. "We can't keep doing this. This, whatever this is. It's hovering in the middle of nowhere, and it's killing me." I wanted to look away, to retreat back into the safety of the party and the safety of my marriage, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes, you do," he said, stepping closer. Now the space between us was gone. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my forehead. He didn't touch me with his hands, but his presence was an embrace. "You're living a life that's too small for you, and you're hoping that if you stay quiet enough, nobody will notice you're unhappy." "But I notice. I see you, Elena. Not the architect, not the wife, you." His hand came up then, not to grab me, but to slowly, tentatively brush a stray lock of hair away from my face. His fingertips grazed my temple, and the contact sent a physical shock through my system. It was such a small, respectful gesture, yet it felt more intimate than anything I had experienced in years. In that moment, the vulnerability was absolute. I realized that the safe life I had built was actually a cage, and the person I was supposed to be was screaming to get out. I wanted to lean into him, to let the tension snap and see what happened in the aftermath. I could see the reflection of my own longing in his eyes, but as the first drops of rain began to fall, cool and sharp against my skin, reality rushed back in. I thought of David, sitting at home, probably watching a documentary and waiting up for me. I thought of our house, our shared history, and the thousands of tiny threads that bound our lives together. If I crossed this line, those threads wouldn't just stretch, they would sever. I realized that Julian wasn't just a man. He was a mirror showing me what I was missing. The problem wasn't just my attraction to him. The problem was that I had stopped being a partner in my own life and had become a passenger. I stepped back, the sudden distance feeling like a physical coldness. "I can't," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Not like this. Not because I'm running away from something else." Julian looked at me for a long time, the rain beginning to bead on his shoulders. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, but also like he understood. "Then what are you going to do, Elena?" I didn't have an answer for him that night. I walked back into the party, through the glass doors, and straight out to my car. I drove home in the pouring rain, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the deluge. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. David was in the living room, exactly where I imagined he'd be. He looked up and smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "How was the gala?" he asked. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, my damp dress clinging to my legs. "We need to talk, David. Really talk." The consequence of that night wasn't a dramatic affair or a scandalous discovery. It was the slow, painful process of radical honesty. Over the next few months, I had to dismantle the perfect image I had projected for so long. I had to admit to David, and to myself, that I had been checked out of our marriage for a long time. There were tears, long nights of circular arguments, and a period of separation that felt like treading water in the middle of the ocean. It was the hardest thing I've ever done because it required me to be the bad guy in a story where there was no easy villain. I eventually left the firm and started my own small practice. A move that was financially terrifying, but emotionally liberating. Julian and I never happened. After that night on the terrace, the spark was still there, but the context had changed. He eventually moved to another city for a different project, and we lost touch. Sometimes I wonder what if, but more often, I think of him as the catalyst I needed to stop sleepwalking through my own existence. My relationship with David didn't survive in its old form. We eventually divorced, but it wasn't a bitter ending. It was a necessary one. We were two good people who had grown into different shapes, and trying to force ourselves to fit back into the old molds was only causing us both pain. Today, I live in a small apartment in the city, the kind of place with high ceilings and drafty windows that I would have never chosen 5 years ago. It's not perfect, but it's mine. I'm no longer the woman who has everything on paper. I'm the woman who is finally learning how to be honest with herself. I've learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in a relationship isn't to argue or to grow apart. It's to stop being curious about the person you're with. and more importantly, to stop being curious about yourself. That night on the terrace was the end of a very long, very comfortable lie. And while the truth was messy and expensive, I wouldn't trade the clarity I have now for all the security in the world. Looking back, I realize that we all have those moments, those terrace moments, where the air gets thin and we're forced to see the cracks in our own foundations. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a failure, and sometimes it's just a quiet realization in the middle of the night. It's terrifying to let go of the safety of what we know, but it's the only way to find out who we actually are when the lights go down. I'm curious, have you ever had a moment like that? A time when a single encounter or a sudden realization made you question everything you thought you wanted? It's never easy to talk about the parts of our lives that don't fit into a neat box. But I've found that sharing these stories is the only way we realize we're not alone in the dark. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Or if you've had a similar experience of finding yourself in the middle of a complicated choice. Please hit the like button, share this story, and follow for more real-life reflections. We're all just trying to figure it out, one breath at a time. Would you like me to focus more on a specific part of her journey, like the conversations with David or her process of starting her own firm? If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between a safe life and an uncertain truth? Please hit the like button, share this story with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life reflections on love, growth, and the courage it takes to start over. We're all just trying to figure it out, one breath at a time.